I stood in the marble entryway of my sister's penthouse, champagne flute trembling in my hand, watching my husband lean in to whisper something in Vanessa's ear. She laughed, that practice tinkle she'd perfected at finishing school, and touched his arm with a familiarity that made my stomach turn. Around us, Manhattan's elite mingled in designer gowns and tailored suits, celebrating what they'd been told was a charity gala. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. What they didn't know was that I'd orchestrated this entire evening. Every guest. Every detail. Every revelation that was about to unfold. Behind me, standing in the shadows near the grand piano, was the one person who'd helped me see the truth. Maggie Rothman, my sister's former mother-in-law, the woman everyone had written off as bitter and vengeful. The woman who turned out to be the only honest person in this entire charade. She caught my eye and gave the slightest nod. It was time. Within the hour, every lie my husband's family had carefully constructed would crumble. Within the hour, my sister's perfect facade would shatter like the crystal chandelier above our heads. But first, let me tell you how I got here. 3 weeks earlier, I'd been a different person entirely. Claire Donovan, devoted wife of 7 years, sister to Manhattan socialite Vanessa Rothman, daughter-in-law to the prestigious Donovan family of Greenwich. I taught art history at a small private school in Brooklyn Heights, lived in a modest brownstone apartment that Derek and I could barely afford, and spent my weekends trying to keep up with a family that had never quite accepted me. That Thursday in early September started like any other. I woke at 6, made coffee in our tiny galley kitchen, and listened to Derek shower while I reviewed lesson plans for my Renaissance art class. He emerged in his usual uniform of crisp white shirt and navy suit, the one his mother had bought him from Brooks Brothers because she said my taste in menswear was too pedestrian. We'd been married for 7 years, together for 9, and somewhere along the way, I'd stopped noticing when he stopped kissing me goodbye. That morning, he grabbed his briefcase, muttered something about a late meeting with clients, and was out the door before I could mention that his mother had called 3 times the previous evening. Patricia Donovan didn't leave messages. She expected you to know she'd called and to respond immediately, like some sort of telepathic summons only proper daughters-in-law could detect. I'd failed that test repeatedly over the years. My phone buzzed as I locked our apartment door. A text from Vanessa, my older sister by 3 years and a lifetime in terms of success. Lunch today? The Waverly. 1 o'clock. Where's something nice? I stared at the message, feeling that familiar twist of anxiety and inadequacy that Vanessa had been inspiring in me since childhood. Vanessa didn't do casual sister lunches. Every interaction was calculated, every invitation had an agenda. Since her divorce from Gregory Rothman 2 years ago, she'd become even more particular about her social calendar. The settlement had been generous, obscenely so, and she'd used it to reinvent herself as a philanthropist and patron of the arts. Her penthouse on Central Park West was featured in Architectural Digest. Her charity galas were attended by celebrities and politicians. And somehow, despite all her success, she still found time to make me feel like the awkward little sister who couldn't get anything right. I texted back a simple confirmation and spent the rest of my morning distracted through 2 class periods. My students noticed. During a discussion of Caravaggio's use of light and shadow, one of my brightest pupils asked if I was feeling all right. I assured her I was fine, but the truth was that Vanessa's sudden interest in lunch had set off alarm bells I couldn't quite explain. The Waverly was the kind of restaurant where a salad cost $40 and the waitstaff knew your dietary restrictions before you sat down. I arrived 5 minutes early, a habit from childhood when arriving after Vanessa meant enduring her pointed comments about punctuality and respect. She was already there, of course, seated at her usual corner table with a view of the street. She looked immaculate in a cream silk blouse and tailored pants, her dark hair swept into a chignon that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She air-kissed both my cheeks, her perfume an expensive cloud that made my eyes water. "You look tired, Claire," she said, her concern performative and precise. "Are you sleeping enough? Derek mentioned you've been stressed about work." I sat down, already feeling defensive. "When did you talk to Derek?" "Oh, he stops by the penthouse sometimes, she said casually, studying the menu she'd probably memorized years ago. When he's in the neighborhood for meetings. You know how it is in the city, easier to pop in than coordinate schedules. Something about her tone felt off, but I couldn't pinpoint exactly what. Derek had never mentioned visiting Vanessa. In fact, he usually complained about having to attend her charity events, calling them pretentious gatherings of people congratulating themselves for writing checks. We ordered, Vanessa selecting the Dover sole while I chose something cheaper, a pasta dish that would inevitably make me feel guilty for eating carbs in her presence. She watched me order with that slight upturn of her lips that meant she was judging my choices while maintaining plausible deniability. So, she began, once the waiter had departed with our menus, I wanted to talk to you about Mother's birthday gala next month. I'm chairing the event, and I thought it would be lovely if you could help with some of the planning. My mother, Elizabeth Hartley, lived in a sprawling estate in Westchester and had barely spoken to me since I'd married Derek instead of the hedge fund manager she'd introduced me to at a dinner party. The idea that Vanessa wanted my help with anything related to our mother was suspicious at best. What kind of help? I asked carefully. Vanessa waved her hand dismissively. Oh, nothing too demanding. Maybe handling some of the vendor coordination, organizing the seating charts, that sort of thing. You're always so good with details. It was a backhanded compliment, her specialty. What she meant was that I was useful for menial tasks while she took credit for the overall vision. But there was something else in her expression, a barely concealed excitement that made me uneasy. Over lunch, she asked pointed questions about Derek. How was his work going? Was he traveling much? How were things between us? Each question felt like she was probing for something specific, and I found myself being deliberately vague in response. Things were fine. Work was busy. We were good. The lies came easily because admitting the truth, that my marriage had become a series of polite exchanges between two people who barely knew each other anymore, felt like handing her ammunition. When we finished, Vanessa insisted on paying, another power play disguised as generosity. As we stood to leave, she hugged me, holding on just a moment too long. I'm glad we did this, she murmured. We should spend more time together, Claire. Family is so important. Walking back to the subway, I felt unsettled in a way I couldn't articulate. Something about the entire lunch had felt choreographed, as if Vanessa had been playing a role rather than simply having a meal with her sister. That evening, Derek came home after 10, claiming the client meeting had run late and then turned into drinks. He smelled like expensive whiskey and perfume, a scent I didn't recognize but that tickled something in the back of my mind. I was already in bed, pretending to read but actually scrolling through social media on my phone. He showered longer than usual, and when he finally climbed into bed beside me, he stayed on his side, maintaining the careful distance that had become our normal. I mentioned having lunch with Vanessa. Oh. His voice was carefully neutral. How is she? I turned to look at him in the dim light from the street lamp outside our window. She mentioned you stop by her penthouse sometimes. For meetings. Derek was quiet for a moment, then shrugged. Once or twice. Her place is near some of my clients downtown. It's convenient. The explanation was reasonable, but something in his delivery felt rehearsed. I wanted to press further, but exhaustion and an unwillingness to start a fight I wasn't ready for kept me silent. Instead, I turned back to my phone, and that's when I saw it. Vanessa had posted a photo on Instagram an hour earlier. She was at some gallery opening in Chelsea, champagne in hand, surrounded by the usual crowd of wealthy patrons and artists. But in the background, partially obscured by other guests, I could see Derek's profile. He was laughing at something, his hand resting on the small of a woman's back. I zoomed in, my heart beginning to race. The woman's face was turned away, but her honey blonde hair and the distinctive emerald bracelet on her wrist were unmistakable. It was Vanessa. I glanced at Derek, who had already turned away from me, his breathing evening out in what might have been sleep or a convincing imitation of it. My mind raced through the implications. He'd said he was at a client meeting until late. Vanessa's post was timestamped 90 minutes ago. The gallery in her post was in Chelsea, nowhere near where Derek's office was located in Midtown. I spent the next hour lying awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself I was overreacting. There could be a reasonable explanation. Maybe the client meeting had been near the gallery. Maybe he'd run into Vanessa by chance. Maybe the woman in the photo wasn't even her. But my gut knew better. That twist of anxiety from earlier had transformed into something sharper, more certain. The next morning, I called in sick to work and did something I'd never done before. I checked Derek's laptop. He'd left it on the dining table, something he rarely did, and I knew his password because he'd never bothered to change it from our wedding anniversary. What I found in his email made my hands shake so badly I almost dropped the computer. Months of correspondence with Vanessa. Intimate messages that made my stomach turn. Planning for secret meetings. Discussions about how to handle me, how to keep me unaware, how much longer they needed to maintain the charade. And worse, emails that included Derek's mother Patricia, his father Kenneth, even his sister Lauren. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. They all knew. They'd been covering for him, creating alibis, inviting me to family dinners while Derek was with Vanessa, maintaining this elaborate fiction that I was a cherished member of the family while systematically lying to my face. I read through message after message, each one a knife to my chest. Patricia writing to Derek about how I'd never been right for him anyway, how Vanessa was more suitable for the family's social standing. Kenneth discussing how to restructure some investments to protect assets in case I became suspicious. Lauren complaining about having to be nice to me at Sunday dinners when everyone knew the situation. But it was the messages between Derek and Vanessa that truly destroyed me. They'd been sleeping together for over a year, starting shortly after her divorce was finalized. She wrote about how she'd always been attracted to him, even before I'd introduced them at a family dinner 8 years ago. He wrote about how being with her felt like coming home to where he belonged, how she understood his ambitions in ways I never could. They discussed my inadequacies in detail, my boring job, my lack of social grace, my inability to fit into their world. Vanessa even joked about how easy it had been to manipulate me at lunch, how I'd believed every word she said. The final message thread was from just 2 days ago. Vanessa suggesting they needed to accelerate their timeline. Derek agreeing that he would file for divorce after his mother's birthday gala, timing it to minimize social embarrassment for the family. Patricia chiming in with the name of a lawyer who could ensure I walked away with as little as possible. They were planning to blindside me, to use the gala as a sort of final performance of our marriage before dismantling it on their terms. I sat at our dining table, surrounded by the life Derek and I had built together, and felt it all crumble into dust. 7 years of marriage. 9 years together. All of it a lie, or at least the last year had been. And my own sister, the person who was supposed to have my back no matter what, had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. I closed the laptop carefully and walked to our bedroom. In the closet, behind Derek's winter coats, I found a garment bag I'd never seen before. Inside was an expensive tuxedo, tags still attached, from a designer boutique in Soho. The receipt was tucked into the pocket, dated from last week. Purchased by Vanessa Rothman. For her date to an upcoming gala at the Metropolitan Museum, one she'd never mentioned to me. That's when my phone rang. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. The voice on the other end was crisp, elderly, and utterly unexpected. Claire Donovan. This is Margaret Rothman. I believe we need to talk about your husband and my former daughter-in-law. I sank onto the edge of the bed, gripping the phone. Maggie Rothman. Vanessa's ex-mother-in-law. I'd met her exactly once, at Vanessa's wedding to Gregory, and remembered her as an elegant woman with steel in her eyes and a reputation for being difficult. After the divorce, Vanessa had painted her as a vindictive obstacle to her happiness, someone who'd made the marriage impossible with her constant interference and criticism. How did you get my number? I managed. That's not important, Maggie replied. What matters is that I've been watching your sister very carefully since she divorced my son. I made some mistakes during their marriage, trusted the wrong people, believed lies I should have questioned. I won't make those mistakes again. She paused, and I could hear traffic in the background. I know about the affair, Claire. I know what they're planning. And I know you deserve better than to be ambushed by people who should love you. My throat tightened with unexpected emotion. Why are you calling me? Because Vanessa took something from me, Maggie said simply. My relationship with my son, my reputation, and a considerable amount of money through a settlement that was based on fabricated claims of my interference in their marriage. She's very good at playing the victim while actually being the predator. And now she's doing it to you. I thought about hanging up. This could be some twisted revenge plot from a bitter ex-in-law. But something in Maggie's tone, a weary honesty that felt familiar, kept me listening. What do you want? I asked. To help you, she replied. And to finally expose your sister for what she really is. Meet me tomorrow. I'll send you an address. Come alone, and bring an open mind. That's all I ask. The call ended before I could respond. I sat there holding the phone, Derek's expensive tuxedo still in my lap, and felt something shift inside me. The shock and pain were still there, the betrayal still burned. But underneath it all, something harder was forming. Something that felt like steel wrapped in ice. They thought I was weak. Boring. Easy to fool. They'd underestimated the quiet girl who'd always faded into the background while Vanessa sparkled and Derek charmed. That night, when Derek came home, I acted perfectly normal. I'd put his laptop back exactly where he'd left it, hidden the tuxedo receipt in my purse, and prepared his favorite dinner. We ate together, discussing nothing important, and I watched him lie about his day with a smile on my face. He had no idea that I knew everything. No idea that while he was plotting my humiliation, I was beginning to plan something of my own. As I cleared the dishes, I thought about Maggie Rothman's call. About the offer of help from someone who understood betrayal as intimately as I was learning to. About the possibility that maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to be the victim in this story. The address Maggie sent led me to a converted loft in Soho, the kind of space that whispered old money rather than screaming new wealth like Vanessa's penthouse. I stood outside the heavy industrial door on a Saturday morning, wondering if I was making a terrible mistake. Derek thought I was at a teacher's workshop in New Jersey. I'd left early, coffee in hand, playing the role of dedicated educator while my insides churned with anxiety and something else I was only beginning to recognize as rage. The door opened before I could knock. Maggie Rothman stood there, smaller than I remembered, probably in her early 70s but with the kind of bearing that made age irrelevant. She wore simple black trousers and a cashmere sweater, her silver hair cut in a sharp bob that framed intelligent gray eyes. Those eyes studied me for a long moment before she stepped aside to let me enter. The loft was magnificent in its restraint. Exposed brick walls, original hardwood floors, furniture that was clearly expensive but chosen for comfort rather than impression. Bookshelves lined one entire wall, crammed with volumes that looked actually read rather than decoratively arranged. Large windows flooded the space with morning light, and I could see the cast-iron facades of neighboring buildings through the wavy antique glass. Sit, Maggie said, gesturing to a leather sofa that had the worn patina of something well-loved. I've made coffee, or there's tea if you prefer. Coffee, I managed, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. Black. She disappeared into an open kitchen area and returned with 2 mugs, setting them on the low table between us before settling into a chair across from me. For a moment, we simply looked at each other, 2 women connected by betrayal and a shared enemy. You found something, Maggie said. It wasn't a question. That's why you agreed to meet. Not just because of my call, but because you confirmed what I told you was true. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. His emails. Messages with Vanessa, with his family. They'd been planning this for months. Planning to divorce me right after his mother's birthday gala. Maggie's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Sympathy, maybe, or recognition. Vanessa is very good at long games. With Gregory, she spent a year systematically turning him against me, documenting every disagreement, recording conversations out of context, building a case that I was the obstacle to their happiness. By the time she filed for divorce, she had my own son convinced I was a controlling monster. How much did she get? I asked, already knowing the answer would be substantial. Maggie's smile was bitter. 42 million, plus the penthouse that had been in my family for 3 generations. Gregory thought he was protecting her, giving her security. He didn't realize until much later that she'd been planning to leave him almost from the beginning. The marriage was just a means to an end. I thought about Vanessa's reinvention after the divorce, the charity work, the social climbing, the carefully curated image of sophisticated philanthropy. All bought with Rothman money while she systematically destroyed the woman who'd given it to her. Why didn't you fight it? I asked. Maggie took a long sip of her coffee before answering. I did fight. That's how Vanessa won. She made my fighting look like harassment, my attempts to show Gregory the truth look like vindictive lies. She's brilliant at playing the victim, at making anyone who challenges her appear cruel or unhinged. By the time I realized what was happening, I'd already lost. She set down her mug with careful precision. But I'm older now. Wiser. And I've spent 2 years learning everything I can about your sister. Her patterns, her methods, her vulnerabilities. I won't make the same mistakes twice. What vulnerabilities? I leaned forward, suddenly eager. What did you find? Maggie stood and walked to a desk in the corner, returning with a leather portfolio. She opened it to reveal photographs, bank statements, printed emails, handwritten notes in what I recognized as her precise script. This is 2 years of watching and waiting. Your sister is not nearly as clever as she thinks she is. She just surrounds herself with people too dazzled or too complicit to see the truth. She spread documents across the table between us. Here, a record of a charity donation that never reached its intended recipient. The money went to an offshore account instead. Here, emails between Vanessa and a married city councilman, leveraging an affair for favorable zoning changes on a property she was developing. Here, evidence that the abuse claims she made against Gregory during the divorce were fabricated, including testimony from her own therapist that contradicts her legal statements. I stared at the evidence, my hands shaking as I picked up document after document. This is enough to destroy her, I whispered. Why haven't you used it? Maggie's smile was sharp. Because I needed the right moment and the right ally. Exposing her myself would look like exactly what she accused me of being, a bitter ex-mother-in-law seeking revenge. But you, her own sister, betrayed and humiliated, discovering the truth about who she really is? That's a different story entirely. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. The question is, Claire, how far are you willing to go? I thought about Derek whispering in Vanessa's ear at gallery openings while I graded papers at home. About his family sitting around dinner tables, discussing my inadequacies while passing the wine. About 7 years of my life built on lies and manipulation. About my sister, who I'd admired and envied and loved, stealing my husband while pretending to care about family connection over expensive lunches. As far as it takes, I said, and meant it. Maggie nodded as if she'd expected nothing less. Then we have work to do. But first, you need to understand something important. This isn't about revenge, though that will certainly be satisfying. This is about justice. About ensuring that Vanessa can't do to someone else what she's done to us. About protecting the next person who might fall into her web. She gathered the documents back into the portfolio. And it's about you reclaiming your power from people who thought you were too weak to fight back. Over the next 4 hours, Maggie laid out a plan that was both elegant and ruthless. We would let them proceed with their timeline, let them think I remained oblivious. Meanwhile, we would gather additional evidence, build an ironclad case, and prepare for a confrontation that would happen on my terms, not theirs. The birthday gala they planned to use as their final performance? We would turn it into something else entirely. But we need more than just evidence of the affair, Maggie explained. We need to demonstrate a pattern of behavior, to show that this isn't an isolated incident but who Vanessa fundamentally is. And we need to do it in a way that's impossible for her to spin or deflect. I thought for a moment, my mind working through possibilities. Derek's family knows about the affair. They're complicit. His mother has been helping them hide it. Exactly, Maggie nodded approvingly. So we need evidence of that conspiracy. Proof that this isn't just two people having an affair, but an entire family systematically deceiving you. That transforms it from a tawdry romance into something much darker. How do we get that proof? I asked. Maggie's smile was almost feral. We start attending family dinners. You become the perfect daughter-in-law, concerned about Derek's stress, eager to help with the birthday gala planning. You get close to Patricia, volunteer to assist with whatever she needs. You make yourself indispensable and invisible at the same time. The idea of sitting across from Patricia, knowing what I knew, pretending everything was fine, made my stomach turn. But I understood the logic. I'd spent 7 years trying to win her approval. Now I would use that history to my advantage. What about Vanessa? I asked. She wanted me to help with the gala planning too. Perfect, Maggie said. Accept eagerly. Offer to take on more responsibility than she asks for. Make yourself essential to the event's success. That gives you access to her calendar, her contacts, her correspondence. And it puts you right where we need you to be when everything comes to light. She pulled out a small device from her desk drawer. This is a recording pen. It works, writes normally, but also records audio with exceptional clarity. Keep it with you at all times. Document everything. Over coffee that had grown cold, we refined the plan. I would need to be careful, methodical, patient. Any sign that I suspected would cause them to accelerate their timeline or become more cautious. I had to play the role of trusting wife and grateful sister so convincingly that no one would see the trap closing around them until it was too late. What about Gregory? I asked suddenly. Your son. Does he know you're doing this? Maggie's expression softened slightly, the only crack I'd seen in her composed exterior. Gregory and I barely speak. Vanessa saw to that. He believes I'm a difficult woman who couldn't accept his happiness. Perhaps when this is over, he'll see the truth. Or perhaps the damage is too deep. Either way, this isn't about winning him back. It's about preventing her from destroying anyone else. Before I left, Maggie gave me a burner phone, a set of instructions for secure communication, and something unexpected. A thick envelope containing financial documents. What is this? I asked, confused. Your insurance policy, she replied. That's a complete accounting of your and Derek's assets, including several accounts you probably don't know about. Property deeds, investment records, credit card statements going back years. You'll need these when you file for divorce. She paused, her expression serious. Because make no mistake, Claire, when we're done, your marriage will be over. This path leads to freedom, but it comes at a cost. I clutched the envelope, feeling its weight both literal and metaphorical. I know, I said quietly. I think I've known for a while that it was already over. I just didn't want to admit it. The woman I'd been a week ago wouldn't have recognized the person standing in Maggie's loft, plotting elaborate revenge against her own sister. But that woman had been living in a fantasy, believing in a marriage that existed only in her imagination. This new version of myself was harder, clearer, more focused. And I wasn't sure yet if I liked her, but I knew I needed her. I left through a back entrance Maggie showed me, emerging onto a different street entirely, a small precaution that already felt natural. The September air had turned crisp, autumn asserting itself over the last remnants of summer. I walked for blocks, processing everything, before finally hailing a cab back to Brooklyn Heights. Derek was home when I arrived, sitting on our couch with his laptop, likely working on something for the affair I now knew about in excruciating detail. He looked up when I entered, his smile easy and false. How was the workshop? Informative, I lied smoothly, hanging my coat in the closet. Lots of new techniques for engaging students with classical art. That's great, he said, already looking back at his screen. I'm glad you're investing in your professional development. The condescension in his tone would have hurt a week ago. Now it just fueled the cold determination growing inside me. I made dinner while Derek worked, chopping vegetables with methodical precision, each knife stroke a small act of controlled violence. We ate together, discussing nothing important, and I watched him lie about a conference call he needed to take later. After he disappeared into our bedroom with his phone, I heard him laughing, that intimate sound I'd once thought was reserved for me. Now I knew he was probably texting Vanessa, maybe even Patricia, discussing their plans while I cleaned up our dishes in the next room. That night, I pulled out the envelope Maggie had given me and spread its contents across our dining table. The documents revealed a financial picture I hadn't fully understood. Derek made good money as a corporate attorney, but not enough to support the lifestyle his family expected. His parents had been supplementing our income for years, deposits that appeared in accounts I'd never known existed. Money that came with expectations and control. More disturbing were the credit card statements showing expensive purchases at jewelry stores, high-end restaurants, weekend trips to the Hamptons. All on cards in Derek's name that I'd never seen bills for. All dated throughout the past year. All, I realized with sickening clarity, purchased for and with Vanessa. He'd been building an entire secret life with my sister using money his parents provided, while I'd been teaching teenagers about Renaissance art and believing we were saving for a house we'd never buy. I photographed every document with the burner phone Maggie had given me, creating a backup of evidence that existed outside Derek's reach. Then I carefully replaced everything in the envelope and hid it inside a stack of old art history textbooks in my office, somewhere Derek would never think to look. Sunday morning brought a call from Patricia. Her voice had that particular brightness that meant she wanted something. "Claire, dear, I'm so glad I caught you. I wanted to discuss the seating arrangements for Kenneth's birthday dinner next weekend. Would you have time to come to Greenwich tomorrow? We could have lunch and go over the details." The invitation was unprecedented. Patricia had never invited me anywhere alone, never sought my input on anything. This was Maggie's plan already bearing fruit. They needed me cooperative and unsuspecting, willing to help with events that would become my husband's alibi for time spent with my sister. "I'd love to," I said warmly. "What time should I arrive?" Patricia's relief was audible. "Wonderful. Shall we say 11? That gives us plenty of time to work through everything." After we hung up, I texted Maggie on the burner phone. "Patricia invited me to Greenwich tomorrow. Seating arrangements for birthday dinner." Her response came immediately. "Perfect. Wear the recording pen. Be agreeable to everything. Document the house layout, take photos if you can do so discreetly. We need to understand their home territory." I spent the rest of Sunday being the perfect wife. I did laundry, including Derek's dress shirts that smelled faintly of perfume I couldn't identify but suspected I knew. I meal prepped for the week, organized our apartment, even initiated a conversation about maybe finally looking at houses in the spring. Derek engaged enthusiastically, lying about how excited he was to take that step together, discussing neighborhoods we should consider. All while knowing he planned to divorce me in less than 6 weeks. That night, I lay beside him in the dark, listening to his breathing even out into sleep, and felt absolutely nothing. The love I'd carried for him, the hope I'd nurtured despite all the signs of our marriage's decay, had been cauterized by truth. What remained was clear-eyed understanding and a determination to ensure he never saw me coming. Monday morning, I dressed carefully for Greenwich in clothes Patricia would approve of, a simple navy dress and pearls my mother had given me for my college graduation. I took the train north, watching Manhattan give way to suburbs and then to the manicured estates of Connecticut's wealthy enclaves. The Donovan house sat on 3 acres of perfectly maintained grounds, a Georgian colonial that screamed old money despite the fact that Kenneth had made his fortune in commercial real estate only 30 years earlier. New money desperately performing as old, Maggie had described it once, and I'd thought she was being unkind. Now I understood she'd been accurate. Patricia met me at the door herself, something the housekeeper usually did, another sign of how important my cooperation was to their plans. She looked elegant as always in camel-colored cashmere and tasteful gold jewelry, her blonde hair styled in the same cut she'd worn for decades. "Claire, darling, so wonderful of you to come." She kissed both my cheeks, enveloping me in her signature perfume. "Come in, come in. I've had Margaret prepare a light lunch for us." The house was exactly as I remembered, all tasteful neutrals and antique furniture, photographs of Derek and his sister Lauren arranged on every available surface. Conspicuously absent were any photos of Derek and me together, a subtle message I'd internalized years ago. I didn't fit the family aesthetic, wasn't the daughter-in-law Patricia had envisioned for her son. We settled in her sitting room, a feminine space dominated by a portrait of Patricia from 20 years earlier. Lunch was served on china so delicate I was afraid to breathe on it, each course an exercise in performing refinement. Patricia asked about my teaching, feigning interest while I described recent lessons, her eyes glazing slightly as I discussed Baroque painting techniques. She'd never understood why Derek married someone with such pedestrian ambitions. "Now," she said when the plates were cleared, "let's discuss Kenneth's birthday. We're planning something quite special this year. A sit-down dinner here followed by dancing. About 80 guests, all close friends and family." She pulled out a leather-bound planner filled with lists and notes in her precise handwriting. "I'm thinking of a sophisticated autumn theme, deep burgundies and gold accents." She looked at me expectantly. "What do you think?" "It sounds beautiful," I said, pulling out a notebook and the recording pen Maggie had given me. "I'd love to help however I can." Patricia's smile was genuine for perhaps the first time since I'd arrived. "That's wonderful, Claire. I knew I could count on you." She began outlining tasks, flower arrangements to coordinate, place cards to calligraph, a slideshow of Kenneth's life to assemble. All time-consuming detail work that would keep me busy and invested while Derek pursued his affair. As we worked through the planning, Patricia's phone buzzed repeatedly. She glanced at it each time with a small smile, her attention drifting. Finally, she picked it up and typed a quick response, and I saw just enough of the screen to catch the contact name. Vanessa. My sister was texting my mother-in-law in the middle of our planning session, and Patricia was smiling about it. "I'm sorry," Patricia said, setting the phone down. "Your sister had some questions about the Metropolitan Museum gala she's organizing. She's asked me to join the planning committee. It's such an honor to work with her, Claire. She's really quite remarkable." The praise stung, but I kept my expression neutral. "She is," I agreed. "Very talented at bringing people together." Patricia missed the double meaning entirely, launching into effusive compliments about Vanessa's sophistication and social grace, all while subtly implying these were qualities I lacked. I nodded and smiled and took notes, letting the recording pen capture every word. When Patricia excused herself to take a phone call, I took the opportunity to explore. The house was familiar, but I'd never paid attention to the details that mattered now. I moved through the first floor with casual purpose, photographing the layout with my phone, noting security cameras and the positions of rooms. In Kenneth's study, I found what I was looking for. A wall calendar marked with appointments and dates, including several notations in Patricia's handwriting that made my blood run cold. November 10th was circled in red with the words, "D Files," written in neat script. November 15th, circled in blue, red, V Celebration Dinner. Between those dates were multiple entries marked only with initials that I now understood. D and V, Derek and Vanessa. Meeting times and locations, all documented by his own mother. I photographed the calendar quickly, my hand surprisingly steady, then returned to the sitting room just as Patricia ended her call. She came back smiling, energized in a way I rarely saw. "That was Vanessa," she confirmed unnecessarily. "She's invited Kenneth and me to preview the gala venue next week." Such a thoughtful girl. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. Patricia was praising my sister for thoughtfulness while helping her steal my husband. I wondered if she even recognized the betrayal, or if in her mind, Vanessa was simply the daughter-in-law she'd always wanted. We worked for another 2 hours, Patricia assigning me increasingly elaborate tasks for the birthday celebration. I accepted everything with enthusiasm, volunteering to take on even more responsibility. By the time I left, she was practically glowing with satisfaction, believing she'd successfully manipulated me into doing all the tedious work while she took credit for the results. She had no idea I was documenting every conversation, every task, every piece of evidence that would eventually prove her complicity. On the train back to Manhattan, I reviewed the photos I'd taken of Kenneth's calendar. The pattern was clear and damning. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening for the past 3 months, D and V appeared on the schedule. Sometimes with locations, upscale restaurants in Tribeca, a gallery opening in Chelsea, a theater performance in Lincoln Center. All the places Derek had told me he was meeting clients or working late. All carefully noted by his mother, who knew exactly where her son was and who he was with. I met Maggie that evening at a small cafe in the West Village, far from anywhere we might be recognized. She arrived wearing oversized sunglasses and a hat, looking like someone's elegant grandmother out for an evening stroll. We sat in the back corner, speaking in low voices while around us other patrons focused on their own conversations. I showed her the photos of the calendar, played her selected portions of the recording from Patricia. Her expression remained neutral, but I saw satisfaction flicker in her eyes. "This is excellent work," she said quietly. "You're establishing a clear pattern of premeditation and family conspiracy. When this goes public, it won't just be about an affair. It will be about systemic deception." She pulled out her own phone and showed me additional evidence she'd gathered. Financial records showing that Patricia and Kenneth had recently transferred a significant sum to Vanessa, ostensibly a loan for a real estate investment. In reality, we both knew, it was likely payment for services rendered, keeping their son happy while facilitating a divorce that would bring Vanessa fully into the family fold. "There's more," Maggie said, her voice dropping even lower. "I've been monitoring Vanessa's social calendar through mutual acquaintances. She's planning something for October 15th. A private dinner party at her penthouse. The guest list is small and exclusive. Your husband is on it, along with my ex-husband Gregory, several influential people from the art world, and interestingly, a divorce attorney named Mitchell Brenner who specializes in high-net-worth separations." I felt my stomach drop. "They're accelerating the timeline." Maggie nodded grimly. "I suspect they're going to announce their relationship publicly at that dinner, position it as a love story rather than an affair. Get ahead of the narrative before filing for divorce. It's actually quite clever." "What do we do?" I asked, fighting back panic. "We get you invited to that dinner," Maggie replied simply. "You're Vanessa's sister. If you express interest in attending one of her famous gatherings, she'll have a hard time refusing without raising suspicion. Especially if you frame it as wanting to be more involved in her life, supporting her social success." The idea of walking into that trap knowingly made my hands shake, but I understood the strategy. If I was there when they planned to reveal their relationship, I could control the narrative instead of being blindsided by it. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a different person. Not suddenly, not in ways that would raise alarm, but gradually, incrementally. I reached out to Vanessa more frequently, suggesting coffee dates and shopping trips. I threw myself into planning Kenneth's birthday celebration with an enthusiasm that made Patricia increasingly warm toward me. I attended family dinners and smiled through conversations where Derek's affair was hidden in plain sight, documented by the recording pen that never left my purse. At home, I was the perfect wife. I cooked Derek's favorite meals, asked about his day, maintained the fiction of our marriage with Oscar-worthy performance. He responded with increasing guilt-tinged affection, probably telling himself he was being kind to me before the inevitable betrayal. What he didn't know was that every conversation, every lie, every moment of false intimacy was being recorded and documented. I was building a case so airtight that no expensive lawyer could dismantle it. Maggie and I met regularly, always in different locations, always careful to avoid detection. She taught me how to think strategically, how to anticipate moves and countermoves. She shared stories of her own mistakes with Gregory and Vanessa, the warning signs she'd missed, the battles she'd fought ineffectively. Her experience became my education, and I absorbed every lesson with grim determination. The breakthrough came during a lunch with Vanessa at a trendy restaurant in the meatpacking district. She'd invited me, claiming she wanted sisterly bonding time, but I knew from intercepted texts between her and Patricia that this was a reconnaissance mission. They wanted to ensure I remained oblivious and compliant. I arrived perfectly dressed in an outfit Vanessa had once complimented, my hair styled the way she'd suggested months ago, playing the role of little sister seeking approval. Vanessa looked radiant, practically glowing with the satisfaction of her secret life. She ordered for both of us, another power play I'd once found protective but now recognized as controlling. As we ate overpriced salads, she asked probing questions about my marriage, my work, my happiness. Each question was carefully designed to assess whether I suspected anything, whether I was a threat to her plans. I fed her exactly what she wanted to hear. Derek and I were good, a bit busy with work but solid. I was enjoying teaching, felt fulfilled in my small way. I even mentioned that I'd been helping Patricia with Kenneth's party and how nice it was to finally feel accepted by his family. Vanessa's smile at that last part was predatory. "I'm so glad," she said, reaching across to squeeze my hand. "Family is everything, Claire. I've always wanted us to be closer." Her touch made my skin crawl, but I returned the squeeze with apparent affection. "Actually," I said, as if the thought had just occurred to me, "I've been meaning to ask. I know you host these incredible dinner parties. I see them on Instagram and they always look so sophisticated. I was wondering if maybe sometime I could attend one. Learn from the master." Vanessa's eyes flickered with surprise, then calculation. I could see her weighing the request, considering angles. "You want to come to one of my dinner parties? Why the sudden interest?" I shrugged, playing embarrassed. "Honestly, I feel like I've been living in my own little bubble. Teaching, grading papers, not engaging with culture the way I should. You're so good at bringing interesting people together. I thought maybe I could expand my horizons a bit, meet some people from the art world beyond academia." I paused, adding the killing stroke. "And I want to understand your life better. I feel like we've grown apart and I miss my sister." The appeal to her ego worked perfectly. Vanessa's expression softened into something that might have passed for genuine emotion. "Oh Claire," she said, her voice warm. "That's so sweet. Of course you can come to one of my gatherings. In fact, I'm hosting a small dinner on October 15th. Very intimate, just a few close friends and some people I think you'd find fascinating. Why don't you come to that one?" I let my face light up with gratitude. "Really? That would be amazing. Should I bring Derek?" The question was strategic, forcing her to make a choice. For a moment, Vanessa hesitated, and I saw the calculation behind her eyes. She couldn't invite me and explicitly exclude my husband without raising questions. But having us both there would complicate her plans for the evening. "Actually," she said carefully, "this particular gathering is more of an art world networking thing. Lots of gallery owners and collectors. Might be a bit boring for Derek. But perfect for you, with your art history background. You'd contribute so much to the conversation." The lie was smooth, practiced. I accepted it with apparent disappointment mixed with excitement. "You're probably right. He's been so busy with work lately anyway. This will be my thing. Thank you so much, Vanessa." She smiled, already planning how to handle this complication, not realizing she'd just invited me to witness my own ambush. We finished lunch with her giving me advice on what to wear, how to engage with her sophisticated friends, all the ways I should try to be less obviously myself. I nodded and took notes, playing the grateful younger sister, while inside I was memorizing every word for the case I was building. That evening, I reported back to Maggie from the burner phone. "She's invited me to the October 15th dinner. The one where they're planning to announce." Maggie's response was immediate. "Perfect. Now we adjust our strategy. They think they're controlling the narrative. We're going to let them believe that right up until the moment we take it away." Over the following days, Maggie outlined a plan that was both elegant and devastating. We would let the dinner proceed, let them make their announcement to their carefully curated audience. But we would ensure that certain additional guests were present, people who could serve as witnesses to what was really happening. And we would prepare a response so thorough, so documented, that their love story would be exposed as the calculated betrayal it actually was. But we needed more evidence. Specifically, we needed proof of what Derek and Vanessa had planned for after the dinner. Maggie had contacts in the legal world, people who owed her favors, and she used them to gather intelligence on Mitchell Brenner, the divorce attorney on Vanessa's guest list. What she discovered was enlightening. Brenner specialized in what he called strategic dissolutions, divorces structured to maximize financial and social advantage for his clients while minimizing damage. He'd recently been retained by Derek, with bills being paid by Kenneth Donovan. The divorce papers were already drawn up, Maggie revealed during one of our meetings. Filed but not yet served. They're planning to serve you the week after the dinner, once they've positioned their relationship publicly. Brenner's strategy is to frame Derek as the sympathetic party, trapped in a marriage that wasn't working, finding real love with someone who understands him. You'll be painted as the obstacle who won't let go gracefully. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. They weren't just planning to leave me, they were planning to make me the villain in their story. The bitter ex-wife who couldn't accept that her husband had found true love, conveniently leaving out the minor detail that true love happened to be her own sister and had started while we were still married. How do we counter that narrative? I asked, feeling the rage I'd been carefully controlling threaten to break through. Maggie's smile was sharp. We get ahead of it. We file first, with evidence they don't know we have. We control the story before they can spin it. But we need to time it perfectly. File too early and they'll scramble to adjust. File too late and they'll have already shaped public opinion. I trusted Maggie's instincts. She'd been outmaneuvered once by Vanessa, but she'd spent 2 years studying her opponent, learning from her mistakes. This time would be different. Meanwhile, my double life continued. I attended another family dinner in Greenwich, this one ostensibly to celebrate Lauren's promotion at her marketing firm. Derek was attentive in public, playing the role of devoted husband while his parents watched approvingly. Vanessa was there too, having been invited by Patricia, who gushed about what a wonderful influence she was. I watched them interact, the casual touches that lasted a moment too long, the inside jokes that excluded everyone else, the way they moved in sync like partners in a dance only they could hear. At one point, I found myself alone in the kitchen with Patricia while she fussed over dessert. She was in high spirits, chatting about the upcoming birthday celebration, about how well the planning was proceeding thanks to my help. Then, perhaps emboldened by wine, she said something that crystallized everything I'd been feeling. You know, Claire, I have to say I'm impressed with how you've stepped up lately. You've always been a bit of a disappointment, frankly, not quite what I envisioned for Derek. But recently you've shown some real growth. It's almost like you're finally understanding what this family requires. The casual cruelty of it, the backhanded compliment that was really an insult, the obliviousness to the irony of praising me for helping plan events that facilitated my own betrayal, all of it was being captured by the recording pen in my pocket. Thank you, Patricia, I said with apparent humility. I've been trying to be more mindful of family expectations. She patted my arm with genuine warmth for perhaps the first time in our relationship. Well, it shows. Kenneth and I have noticed. We were discussing just the other day how you've matured. I think there's hope for you yet. If she only knew that the maturity she was noting was my evolution into someone capable of systematically dismantling her family's carefully constructed lies, she might have been less pleased. But Patricia existed in a world where people like me simply accepted our place, where quiet women stayed quiet and grateful wives remained grateful even when betrayed. She couldn't conceive of the possibility that I was gathering weapons while she offered compliments. That night, lying beside Derek in our bed, I thought about Patricia's words. A disappointment. Not quite what they envisioned. All the years I tried to win her approval, to prove I was worthy of her son, and this was how she actually saw me. A project that might eventually become acceptable if I tried hard enough. The pain of that realization was sharp, but cleaner than the confused hurt I'd felt before. At least now I understood exactly where I stood and exactly what I was fighting against. October crept closer, each day bringing me nearer to the confrontation that would change everything. I continued my double life with increasing skill, the devoted wife and eager sister, the helpful daughter-in-law and enthusiastic party planner. I had coffee with Vanessa and picked out floral arrangements with Patricia. I smiled through Derek's lies and attended cocktail parties where his colleagues had no idea his marriage was a fiction. And through it all, I documented everything. Every conversation, every text message I could access, every piece of evidence that proved this wasn't a spontaneous love affair but a calculated conspiracy involving an entire family. Maggie had become something unexpected, a friend, maybe even a mentor. She understood what it meant to be gaslit by someone you loved, to have your reality systematically dismantled by people who smiled while they destroyed you. Our meetings had evolved beyond strategy sessions into genuine connection. She shared stories of her life before Vanessa, her marriage to Gregory's father, the business she'd built and lost. I shared my own history, my complicated relationship with Vanessa, the ways I'd always felt less than in comparison. We were two women from different generations and circumstances, united by betrayal and a determination to ensure it didn't break us. 1 week before the dinner party, Maggie presented me with a gift. A dress, midnight blue silk that fit like it had been made for me, elegant and sophisticated in a way my usual wardrobe wasn't. For the dinner, she explained. You need to look like you belong in that world, like you're not the inferior little sister they've cast you as. When you walk into that penthouse, you need to command the room. I tried it on in her loft, studying my reflection in her full-length mirror. The woman looking back at me was almost unrecognizable. Poised, confident, powerful. A stranger wearing my face. That's who you've become, Maggie said quietly, standing behind me. Not the woman they tried to make you. The woman you actually are. The next day, Derek came home with news. He was taking me out to dinner the following evening, somewhere nice. It's been too long since we had a proper date, he said with manufactured enthusiasm. I want to show my wife how much I appreciate her. The guilt was written all over his face. He was planning to butter me up before the betrayal, probably on Brenner's advice. One last romantic gesture to prove he'd tried, to show he'd been a good husband right up until the end. Sure, I said with a smile that felt like glass in my mouth. That sounds lovely. The restaurant Derek chose was in Tribeca, one of those places with exposed brick and Edison bulbs where the menu had no prices and the waitstaff spoke in reverent whispers. I recognized it immediately from the calendar in Kenneth's study, one of the locations marked with D and V. He'd brought Vanessa here, probably multiple times, and now he was bringing me to the same place. The symbolism was either incredibly cruel or profoundly stupid. Possibly both. I wore a simple black dress, nothing that would draw attention, and watched Derek across the candlelit table as he performed the role of attentive husband. He asked about my students, complimented my appearance, ordered an expensive bottle of wine he knew I liked. Every gesture felt rehearsed, lines delivered by an actor who'd lost connection to his character. When the sommelier poured our wine, I noticed Derek checking his phone under the table, his face illuminated by the blue glow. A small smile played at his lips before he quickly put it away. Sorry, he said, not sounding sorry at all. Work message. You know how it is. I did know. Work message was code for Vanessa, just as late client meeting and conference call meant hours spent with my sister while I graded papers and meal prepped and maintained the infrastructure of our fraudulent marriage. The waitress appeared with our appetizers, an array of small plates Derek had ordered without consulting me, another habit of his that had evolved from thoughtful to controlling so gradually I'd barely noticed the shift. I'd been thinking, Derek said, cutting into something that might have been octopus. About us, about our future. He looked up, his expression arranged into manufactured sincerity. I know I've been distant lately, caught up with work stress and family obligations. I want to do better, be more present. The lies flowed so smoothly I almost admired the craftsmanship. This was the setup, the foundation he was laying for whatever story he'd tell later. He'd tried to reconnect, had made an effort, but ultimately we'd grown apart. No one's fault, just one of those things. Certainly not an affair with my sister that his entire family had facilitated. I appreciate that, I said, taking a sip of wine that tasted like ash in my mouth. I've felt the distance too. It's nice to have this time together. Derek's smile was relieved, probably thinking I was buying whatever he was selling. We talked about nothing important for the next hour, surface conversation that skirted around anything real. He told anecdotes about work that were likely fabricated, asked about my mother's upcoming visit that we both knew would be awkward and brief. We were two strangers performing intimacy, and the absurdity of it would have been funny if it hadn't been so devastating. When dessert arrived, Derek reached across the table to take my hand. His palm was warm, familiar, and I felt nothing. Whatever I'd once felt for this man had been burned away by truth, leaving only cold clarity in its wake. "I love you," he said, and the lie hung between us like smoke. "I know things haven't been perfect, but I want you to know that you're important to me. Always will be." The always will be felt particularly pointed, past tense masquerading as eternal commitment. This was goodbye disguised as devotion, the last performance before the curtain fell. We left the restaurant with Derek's arm around my waist, playing loving couple for the handful of other diners who might glance our way. Outside, the October air had turned cold, autumn asserting itself with sharp insistence. Derek hailed a cab, and we rode back to Brooklyn in silence, his attention on his phone again, my attention on the world passing outside the window. The city looked different now, harder and brighter, full of people living their own deceptions and truths. At home, Derek disappeared into the bathroom for his extended nighttime routine while I changed into pajamas and climbed into bed. When he finally joined me, he attempted intimacy, his hands moving across my body with practiced familiarity. I let him, detached and observational, studying his technique like an academic exercise. This too was performance, obligation disguised as desire, checking a box on his list of husbandly duties before he could justify his exit with clear conscience. Afterward, while Derek slept, I went to my office and sent Maggie a message on the burner phone. "Dinner tonight was interesting. Same restaurant from the calendar." He's laying groundwork, being attentive and guilty in equal measure. Her response came quickly despite the late hour. Textbook behavior. He's following Brenner's playbook, establishing recent efforts at reconciliation so he can claim he tried everything before leaving. Stay the course. We're almost there. The next morning brought an unexpected complication. My mother called, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. "Claire, darling, we need to talk about your sister." My stomach dropped. "What about her?" There was a long pause, the sound of my mother gathering herself. "I received a call yesterday from Patricia Donovan. She mentioned that you've been helping with Kenneth's birthday party, and she wanted to coordinate with me since I'll be attending. The thing is, during our conversation, she said something odd about how wonderful it was that Vanessa had become so close to the family. How Derek and Vanessa had such similar interests and energy levels." I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. "What are you saying, Mom?" Another pause. "I'm saying that I've known your sister for 33 years, and I recognize when she's pursuing something she wants. And I'm saying that Patricia Donovan was speaking about Vanessa and your husband with a tone that made me deeply uncomfortable. I've been watching Vanessa's social media, Claire. I've seen the photos. The gallery openings, the restaurant tags, the carefully cropped images that always seem to include Derek somewhere in the background. My mother, who I'd always thought was oblivious to family dynamics, who had seemed to favor Vanessa's success over my quieter life, had been paying attention all along. Mom, I started, not sure what to say, how much to reveal. Listen to me, she interrupted, her voice firm in a way I rarely heard. I failed you in many ways while you girls were growing up. I saw how Vanessa overshadowed you, how she needed to be the center of everything, and I didn't intervene the way I should have. I told myself it was just sibling rivalry, that you'd work it out. But I'm seeing it now, really seeing it, and I need to know. Is your husband having an affair with your sister? The direct question hung in the air between us. I could lie, maintain the charade a little longer, keep my mother out of the mess that was about to unfold. Or I could tell her the truth and potentially gain an ally I hadn't anticipated. Yes, I said quietly. For over a year. His entire family knows and has been helping them hide it. They're planning to announce their relationship at a dinner party next week, then file for divorce immediately after. My mother's sharp intake of breath was followed by a string of profanity I'd never heard her use. That manipulative little snake, she hissed, and I knew she meant Vanessa, not Derek. I knew something was wrong. The way she talked about family loyalty at lunch last month, how she kept asking about your marriage, whether you were happy. She was gathering intelligence. I felt tears prick my eyes, unexpected emotion breaking through the carefully controlled facade I'd maintained. Mom, I don't want you involved in this. It's going to get ugly. Too late, she said firmly. I'm already involved. I'm your mother, and I should have protected you better from your sister's worst instincts years ago. I won't make that mistake again. What can I do to help? The offer was so unexpected I almost laughed. I'm handling it, I said. I have help, someone who understands the situation. We're going to make sure the truth comes out on my terms, not theirs. My mother was quiet for a moment. This someone wouldn't happen to be Maggie Rothman, would it? I shouldn't have been surprised. My mother had always been more perceptive than she let on. How did you know? Because I've been doing my own research, she replied. After Patricia's call made me suspicious, I started digging into Vanessa's divorce from Gregory. I found interviews with Maggie Rothman from that period, the way she tried to warn people about Vanessa's character and was dismissed as bitter. I recognized the pattern, Claire. Your sister did to Maggie what she's doing to you. And I'll bet Maggie wants revenge as much as she wants justice. You're not wrong, I admitted. But it's more complicated than that. Maggie's become a friend. She understands what it's like to be systematically dismantled by someone you should be able to trust. Good, my mother said with surprising vehemence. You need someone in your corner who knows how Vanessa operates. And you need to know that I'm in your corner too, whatever you need, witnesses, testimony, financial support when this blows up. I'm here. We talked for another hour, my mother sharing observations about Vanessa's behavior over the years, patterns of manipulation and self-centeredness that she'd witnessed but not fully acknowledged until now. The golden child syndrome, she called it, how she'd unconsciously reinforced Vanessa's belief that she deserved whatever she wanted, consequences be damned. I owe you an apology, Claire, she said before we hung up. For not seeing this sooner, for not protecting you from your own sister. I see you now, and I'm so sorry it took this long. After the call, I sat in my office surrounded by art history textbooks and student papers, feeling a shift in the foundation of everything I'd believed about my family. My mother's unexpected alliance changed the equation, added another layer to the support system I was building. I updated Maggie on the development, and her response was characteristically pragmatic. Good. Having your mother as a witness to the family dynamic strengthens your position. Make sure she documents everything she remembers, especially interactions between Vanessa and Derek that she witnessed before you knew about the affair. The days leading up to October 15th took on a surreal quality. I moved through my life in two realities simultaneously. In one, I was Claire Donovan, art history teacher and devoted wife, helping plan parties and supporting my sister's social success. In the other, I was someone else entirely, someone harder and more strategic, someone gathering evidence and preparing for war. The disconnect was disorienting, but also clarifying. I understood now how people could lead double lives, how easy it was to compartmentalize when survival demanded it. Vanessa called 2 days before the dinner party, her voice bright with artificial warmth. I'm so excited for Thursday, she gushed. I think you're going to have such a wonderful time. I've seated you next to Gregory, actually. You two always got along well, and I think the conversation will be stimulating. The placement was strategic, I realized. Sitting me with her ex-husband kept me occupied and away from Derek, who would presumably be positioned near Vanessa herself. It also gave Vanessa the satisfaction of orchestrating interactions, controlling the social dynamic like a conductor leading an orchestra. That sounds perfect, I said, matching her enthusiasm. What should I bring? Just yourself, she replied. Though I know you're not much of a drinker, so if you want to bring a specific wine or something, feel free. The subtle dig was classic Vanessa, reminding me that my preferences were boring, that I needed special accommodation in her sophisticated world. I'll bring champagne, I said. Something celebratory seems appropriate. I could almost hear her smile through the phone. How thoughtful. See you Thursday at 7. That evening, Maggie and I met for what would be our final planning session before the dinner. She'd secured an invitation for herself through Gregory, framing it as an olive branch, an attempt to mend their fractured relationship. He'd been surprised but pleased, she reported. Still hoping for some version of family reconciliation, still not understanding that Vanessa destroyed that possibility years ago. But he agreed, and now I'll be there to witness whatever unfolds. We reviewed the plan one final time. I would attend as Vanessa's unsuspecting sister, playing my role perfectly. Maggie would arrive as Gregory's repentant former mother-in-law, creating a distraction that would put Vanessa off balance. My mother, who was not on the guest list, would be positioned nearby with a car and driver, ready to extract me if needed. And Judith Brennan, the attorney Maggie had secured, would be on standby with documentation ready to file at a moment's notice. Most importantly, we had arranged for someone unexpected to attend. Thomas Webb, the building's longtime doorman who had worked at Vanessa's building for 15 years, had agreed to provide testimony about the frequency of Derek's visits, the overnight stays, the way staff had been instructed to be discreet about Mr. Donovan's comings and goings. For a man who earned modest wages and had been treated dismissively by Vanessa for years, the prospect of helping expose her deception had been surprisingly appealing. Remember, Maggie said as we prepared to part ways, the goal isn't just to expose the affair. It's to demonstrate the systematic nature of the deception, the conspiracy, the calculated cruelty. Let them make their announcement, let them tell their story. Then we dismantle it piece by piece with evidence they don't know we have. I nodded, feeling the weight of what was coming. Are you scared? She asked, studying my face. Terrified, I admitted. But also ready. I'm tired of being the person they think I am, the quiet one who accepts whatever they decide to do to her. It's time they met the person I've become. Maggie smiled, and for the first time since I'd met her, the expression reached her eyes. You're going to be magnificent, she said. They have no idea what's coming. The night before the dinner, I couldn't sleep. Derek was beside me, peaceful and oblivious, probably dreaming about his imminent freedom and life with Vanessa. I stared at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The years of trying to fit into his family, the compromises I'd made, the way I'd diminished myself trying to be worthy of love that was never real to begin with. Around 3 a.m, I got up and went to my office. I pulled out a journal I'd been keeping since discovering the affair, pages filled with observations and emotions and the raw processing of betrayal. The early entries were anguished. Confused, full of self-blame and desperate attempts to understand what I'd done wrong. The later entries were different, clearer, focused on strategy rather than pain. I could see my own evolution on the pages, from victim to something else entirely. I wrote one final entry. Tomorrow night, everything changes. Tomorrow night, the lies end and the truth emerges, whatever that means for my future. I'm not the same person I was 6 weeks ago. They took away my illusions, my false sense of security, my naive belief in family loyalty and marital devotion. What they gave me in return, probably without realizing it, was clarity. I see them now, really see them, and I see myself too. Not the disappointing daughter-in-law or the inferior sister, but someone capable of fighting back, someone with allies and evidence and a refusal to be destroyed by their cruelty. Whatever happens tomorrow, I'll face it knowing I didn't let them break me. I refuse to be the victim they needed me to be. I closed the journal and returned to bed, sleeping dreamlessly for the few hours that remained. When I woke, Derek was already in the shower, humming tunelessly, happy in a way I hadn't heard in months. Today was likely the day he'd been waiting for, the beginning of his new life. He had no idea it was also the beginning of mine. I spent the day teaching as usual, moving through lessons on Caravaggio and the Baroque period while part of my mind was already at Vanessa's penthouse, playing out scenarios and possibilities. My students noticed my distraction, one brave soul asking if I was feeling all right. Just a big family dinner tonight, I explained. Feeling a bit nervous about it. After school, I met my mother at a cafe near her hotel. She'd come into the city a day early specifically to provide support, and seeing her made something tight in my chest loosen slightly. "You look different," she observed, studying me across the table. "Stronger somehow." "I feel different," I admitted. "Like I've been living in a fog and it finally cleared. Everything's sharp now, even the painful parts." She reached across to squeeze my hand. "Your father would be proud of you. He always said you had steel underneath the softness, that you were tougher than you looked. I wish he was here to see you prove him right." We reviewed the plan once more, my mother's role as emergency backup, positioned to intervene if needed. She'd also agreed to document whatever I told her immediately after the dinner, creating a contemporaneous record of events while they were fresh. Every piece of evidence matters, Maggie had coached us. Every witness statement, every timestamp, every detail that proves this wasn't spontaneous but calculated. At 5, I left to go home and prepare. Derek had texted that he'd be working late and would meet me at the dinner, another transparent lie. He was probably already at Vanessa's, helping her prepare for the evening that would change everything. I dressed carefully in the blue silk Maggie had given me, studying my reflection as I applied makeup with more skill than usual. The woman looking back at me was elegant, composed, ready. A stranger wearing my face, or maybe the person I'd always been underneath the version of myself I'd performed for people who never truly valued me. The elevator to Vanessa's penthouse was glass-walled, offering a dizzying view of Manhattan as it climbed 27 floors. I watched the city shrink beneath me, lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk, and felt strangely calm. This was it. The moment everything I'd been building toward would finally arrive. No more pretending, no more performance. Just truth, delivered with surgical precision. The doors opened directly into Vanessa's foyer, all white marble and crystal chandeliers, the kind of ostentatious wealth that whispered old money while actually screaming new. A server in formal attire greeted me with champagne on a silver tray. I accepted a flute, noting the expensive label, Vanessa's signature extravagance on display. From deeper in the apartment, I could hear conversation and laughter, the particular sound of wealthy people enjoying their own company. I moved through the foyer into the main living space, and the view stopped me despite my preparation. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic vista of Central Park, the trees below just beginning to turn autumn colors, their canopy spreading like a variegated carpet. The apartment itself was decorated with the impersonal perfection of professional design, all neutral tones and carefully curated art pieces chosen for investment value rather than personal connection. Vanessa appeared at my elbow, resplendent in emerald silk that matched her eyes and probably cost more than my monthly salary. "Claire, you made it." She air-kissed both my cheeks, her perfume overwhelming. "You look lovely. Is that dress new?" Her tone suggested surprise that I could look presentable. "It's borrowed," I said truthfully. "From a friend who has excellent taste." Vanessa's smile tightened slightly at the mention of a friend with taste, her competitive nature bristling at the suggestion I had resources beyond her knowledge. "Well, it suits you. Come, let me introduce you to everyone." The gathering was intimate as promised, perhaps 15 people scattered throughout the vast living space. I recognized several faces from Vanessa's social media, gallery owners, and collectors, the kind of people who treated art as commodity rather than passion. Gregory was there, standing near the windows, looking uncomfortable in the way of someone who hadn't wanted to attend but couldn't find a polite exit. And there, on the far side of the room, deep in conversation with a distinguished older man, was Derek. He looked up as Vanessa led me over, and I saw genuine surprise flicker across his face before he recovered. He hadn't known she'd invited me. This was Vanessa's addition to their plan, a complication he'd have to navigate. "Darling," Vanessa called to him with casual intimacy that made several heads turn. "Look who's here. Claire decided to join us tonight." Derek's smile was strained as he crossed to greet me, kissing my cheek with the careful distance of obligation. "Honey, I didn't know you were coming." His eyes accused Vanessa, who simply smiled serenely. "I invited her weeks ago. Didn't I mention it?" "She must have told you." The lie was brazen, designed to make Derek look inattentive, to create a small wedge between us that would make our impending separation more believable. "Oh," Derek said, recovering smoothly. "I must have forgotten." Work's been so consuming lately. He turned to me with manufactured concern. How was your day? We performed the ritual of married conversation while Vanessa watched, her expression pleased, probably enjoying the theater of it. Around us, other guests pretended not to notice the undercurrent of tension, the way Derek's hand never quite touched me, the way Vanessa inserted herself into every pause in our exchange. After a few minutes of excruciating small talk, she took my arm. Let me show you to your seat, Claire. Dinner's almost ready. The dining table was set with the kind of precision that suggested professional help, crystal and china arranged on white linen, low centerpieces of white roses that wouldn't obstruct sightlines. Place cards in calligraphy positioned each guest strategically. I found my name between Gregory and a woman introduced as Miranda Chase, a gallery owner from Chelsea. Across the table, several seats away, Derek was positioned near Vanessa's place at the head. The distance was deliberate, keeping us separated, preventing any united front. Gregory greeted me warmly as I sat, his handsome face creased with genuine smile lines. Claire, it's been too long. How have you been? We chatted easily, catching up on surface details while servers brought the first course. Gregory had always been kind to me during his marriage to Vanessa, one of the few people in her orbit who treated me as more than an afterthought. I wondered if he knew what was coming, if Vanessa had warned him about the evening's agenda. His demeanor suggested ignorance, his attention divided between polite conversation with me and occasional glances at his mother, who had just arrived. Maggie entered like a queen returning from exile, elegant in charcoal gray, her silver hair gleaming under the chandelier light. Gregory stood immediately, surprise and pleasure warring on his face. Mother, I didn't know you were coming. I thought you might appreciate the support, Maggie said, embracing him before taking the seat on his other side. You know how these events can be. At the head of the table, Vanessa's composure cracked slightly, her smile freezing as she processed this unexpected development. Maggie, what a surprise. I don't recall extending an invitation. You didn't, Maggie replied pleasantly. Gregory did. I hope you don't mind. I brought a lovely Bordeaux as a contribution. She produced a bottle that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, handing it to a hovering server. I'm sure we can find room for one more at the table. The power play was masterful. Vanessa couldn't refuse without appearing churlish, especially in front of her carefully curated guests. She gestured graciously to the servers, who quickly added a place setting. Of course, family is always welcome. Her eyes met Maggie's, and something passed between them, recognition of an enemy, acknowledgement of the game about to unfold. Dinner proceeded with the kind of sophisticated conversation that masked deeper tensions. Art market trends, upcoming exhibitions, the relative merits of various investment strategies. I contributed occasionally, drawing on my academic knowledge, and watched Derek struggle to focus on his neighboring conversations while keeping track of both me and Vanessa. He hadn't expected this configuration, his wife and his lover's ex-mother-in-law both present, disrupting whatever narrative he'd planned. Between courses, I excused myself to the restroom, a palatial marble affair that matched the penthouse's overall aesthetic. When I emerged, I found Derek waiting in the hallway, his expression tight with barely controlled frustration. What are you doing here? He hissed, keeping his voice low. Vanessa invited me, I replied calmly. She said it would be good for me to expand my social circle, meet people in the art world. Why didn't you tell me? His tone was accusatory, as if I'd somehow violated protocol by accepting an invitation from my own sister. You said you were working late, I pointed out. I didn't realize this counted as work. Derek's jaw clenched. This is complicated, Claire. There are important people here, business connections. I need you to be careful about what you say, how you present yourself. The condescension was stunning, his concern not for my comfort but for his image. Don't worry, I assured him. I'll be on my best behavior. I won't embarrass you in front of your important connections. I moved past him back toward the dining room, feeling his eyes on me, probably trying to calculate whether I suspected anything, whether my presence was innocent or intentional. Dessert was being served when Vanessa stood, tapping her glass with a spoon to draw attention. The crystalline sound silenced conversation, all eyes turning to her. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," she began, her voice warm and practiced. "You're not just guests, you're friends and family, people who matter to me. I gathered you here for a special reason, something I've been wanting to share." "Here it comes," I thought, watching Derek across the table. He'd straightened in his seat, his expression arranged into appropriate solemnity. This was the moment they'd planned, the announcement that would position their affair as a love story, get ahead of the scandal, control the narrative before anyone else could. Vanessa's smile was radiant as she continued. "As many of you know, the past few years have been transformative for me. My divorce from Gregory, while difficult, allowed me to discover who I really am, what I really want. And in that journey of self-discovery, something unexpected happened." She paused for effect, her eyes sweeping the table before landing on Derek. "I found love in the most surprising place." Derek stood, moving to her side with rehearsed timing. They'd practiced this, I realized, choreographed the moment like a scene from a play. Vanessa took his hand, the gesture intimate and possessive. "Derek and I have been seeing each other for over a year now," she announced. "We tried to deny our feelings, tried to do the right thing, but ultimately we couldn't fight what was meant to be." She turned to him with an expression of adoring devotion that would have been convincing if I didn't know better. "He's my person, my partner, my future." The reaction around the table was mixed. Some guests looked genuinely pleased, already offering congratulations. Others appeared confused, their eyes darting to me, calculating the implications. Gregory had gone very still, his face carefully neutral. Maggie watched with cold assessment, her champagne flute poised halfway to her lips. And I sat frozen, playing my role, the shocked wife processing devastating news. "I know this is difficult," Vanessa continued, her eyes finally meeting mine with perfectly calibrated sympathy. "Especially for Claire. But I hope, in time, she'll understand that you can't control who you love. Derek and I never meant to hurt anyone. We tried to resist, but the connection between us was too strong." The narrative was beautifully constructed, positioning them as star-crossed lovers rather than selfish betrayers. The other guests were buying it, I could see, already romanticizing the situation, probably thinking about how they'd retell this story at their own dinner parties. Miranda Chase beside me reached over to touch my arm in sympathy, her expression pitying. Before anyone could respond, before Derek could add his own practiced lines, Maggie stood. Her movement was unhurried, her expression serene, but something in her posture commanded attention. "How touching," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the suddenly silent room. "A love story for the ages. Star-crossed lovers unable to deny their passion." She set down her champagne flute with precise care. "There's just one problem with that narrative. It's a lie." Vanessa's smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened. "Maggie, I understand you're upset, but this doesn't concern you." "This concerns everyone here," Maggie replied. "Because you've invited them to celebrate a relationship built on deception and systematic betrayal. And they deserve to know the truth about what they're applauding." She turned to address the table at large. What Vanessa has framed as an unexpected love story actually began over 18 months ago, while Claire's marriage was healthy and intact. This wasn't two people falling in love despite themselves. This was a calculated affair that involved not just Derek and Vanessa, but Derek's entire family conspiring to deceive Claire. "That's absurd," Patricia's voice cut in. She'd been quiet until now, seated near the far end of the table, but now she stood as well. "You're a bitter woman trying to poison a beautiful moment because you can't accept that your son chose happiness over your control." Maggie smiled, and it wasn't pleasant. "Interesting that you'd defend them so quickly, Patricia. Almost as if you knew about the affair all along. In fact, you did know. You facilitated it, provided alibis, helped them coordinate their secret meetings." Her eyes swept the room. "Patricia Donovan has been complicit in this deception from the beginning, actively helping her son cheat on his wife while maintaining a facade of family solidarity." "You can't prove any of that," Derek interjected, but his voice lacked conviction. "Actually, I can," I said, standing for the first time. My voice was steady, clearer than I'd expected. I can prove all of it. I pulled out my phone, the recording pen Maggie had given me weeks ago, and a small folder of documents I'd brought in my purse. For the past 6 weeks, I'd been documenting everything. Every lie, every secret meeting, every piece of evidence that proves this wasn't spontaneous love but calculated betrayal. The room had gone completely silent now, all pretense of dinner party conversation abandoned. I opened my phone to the photos of Kenneth's calendar, projecting them onto the large screen Vanessa used for presentations. The images filled the wall, clear evidence of D and V marked repeatedly over months. These are from Derek's father's study calendar, I explained. His mother's handwriting, documenting when and where Derek and Vanessa were meeting, providing coordination for an affair she knew about and enabled. That could be anything, Vanessa tried, but her voice had lost its confident warmth. Those initials could mean anything. I advanced to the next image, emails between Derek and his mother discussing how to handle me, how to keep me unsuspecting. Then recordings of conversations, Patricia's voice unmistakable as she praised me for being less of a disappointment while simultaneously helping her son destroy our marriage. The evidence unspooled like a prosecution case, each piece building on the last, creating an irrefutable pattern of systematic deception. But it wasn't just the affair, I continued, my voice gaining strength. It was the conspiracy around it, the way an entire family decided my feelings, my marriage, my life were expendable. I showed financial records, the accounts I discovered, money spent on Vanessa while I budgeted our groceries. I played selected recordings of family dinners where they discussed me like a problem to be managed, Derek complaining about my boring job, Patricia advising on divorce strategy, Kenneth suggesting ways to minimize what I'd get in the settlement. With each revelation, I watched my sister's carefully constructed image crumble. The sophisticated philanthropist, the wronged ex-wife, the woman who'd overcome so much, all of it falling away to reveal someone calculating and cruel. And I watched Derek, the man I'd loved for 9 years, realize that the quiet wife he'd underestimated had been 3 steps ahead the entire time. Maggie took over then, adding her own evidence. Financial records showing Vanessa's pattern with Gregory, the way she'd systematically isolated him from his mother, the fabricated abuse claims, the settlement extracted through manipulation and lies. This is who you're celebrating, Maggie told the stunned guests. A woman who has made a career of exploiting people who love her, of taking what she wants regardless of who it destroys. And this family, she gestured to Patricia and Kenneth, who enabled it every step of the way. Vanessa's composure finally shattered. You vindictive witch, she spat at Maggie. You've been waiting for this, plotting your revenge because Gregory chose me over your controlling manipulation. Except he didn't choose you, Maggie replied calmly. You spent a year turning him against me with lies and manufactured incidents. And then you divorced him anyway, taking $42 million for the trouble. Just like you're trying to position yourself to take whatever you can from Derek while destroying your own sister in the process. Gregory stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Is this true? He looked between Vanessa and his mother, his expression devastated. The things you told me about Mom, about her trying to sabotage our marriage, were those lies? Vanessa reached for him but he stepped back, away from her touch. Gregory, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, he said quietly. I understand that I've been a fool, that I believed you over my own mother, that I let you drive a wedge between us based on fabrications. He turned to Maggie, his eyes bright with unshed tears. I'm so sorry, Mom. I should have listened. I should have seen. The dinner party had dissolved into chaos now, guests standing, some heading for the door, others clustering in small groups whispering urgently. Miranda Chase beside me looked shell-shocked, probably recalculating every interaction she'd had with Vanessa, every business deal or social connection now tainted by association. Derek stood frozen near Vanessa, looking between her and me as if unsure which crisis to address first. You planned this, Vanessa said, her fury finally directed at me where it belonged. You came here to humiliate me in front of everyone. I came here because you invited me to watch you announce your affair with my husband, I corrected. You wanted an audience for your love story. I just made sure they heard the whole story, not the edited version you prepared. I stepped closer to her, meeting her eyes directly for perhaps the first time in our lives. You've spent our entire lives making me feel less than you, inferior in every way. And I let you, because I loved you and wanted your approval. But you made a mistake. You underestimated me. Derek finally found his voice. Claire, please. We can talk about this privately. We don't need to air everything in front of. In front of who, Derek? I interrupted. Your business connections? The people you wanted to impress with your new relationship. They're already here, already witnesses to your lies. There's no privacy left to protect. I turned to address the remaining guests. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow morning. The papers are already prepared, along with evidence of adultery, financial malfeasance, and conspiracy. My attorney is waiting for my call to proceed. Patricia stepped forward, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. You ungrateful little girl. After everything this family has done for you. Everything you've done for me? I asked, genuine curiosity in my voice. You mean the years of subtle insults, the constant reminders that I wasn't good enough for your son, the active participation in my betrayal? If that's your version of family support, I'm grateful to be free of it. She raised her hand as if to slap me, but Kenneth caught her wrist, his own expression troubled. Enough, Patricia. This is already catastrophic. Don't make it worse. Maggie moved to stand beside me, a united front. I've already filed formal complaints with several charitable organizations about Vanessa's financial improprieties, she announced. The donations that were supposedly made to various causes but actually ended up in offshore accounts. The tax documents that claimed deductions for contributions that were never completed. She smiled at Vanessa's stricken expression. I've spent 2 years gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment. You gave it to me tonight. What do you want? Vanessa asked, her voice raw now, stripped of its usual polish. Money? Is that what this is about? I don't want your money, I said. I want you to understand what you've done, who you've hurt. I want there to be consequences for once in your life, not just for you but for everyone who helped you. I looked at Derek, at Patricia, at the wreckage of what had been carefully planned betrayal. You thought I was weak, that I'd accept whatever you decided to do to me. You were wrong. I turned to leave, Maggie falling into step beside me. Behind us, I could hear Vanessa calling my name, Derek trying to follow, Patricia's voice rising in anger or desperation or some toxic combination of both. But I didn't look back. The elevator doors opened and we stepped inside, leaving behind the penthouse and the ruins of the life I'd thought was mine. As we descended, the city rising to meet us through the glass walls, Maggie spoke quietly. How do you feel? Lighter, I said, surprised to realize it was true. Like I'd been carrying something heavy for so long I forgot what it felt like to stand up straight. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. That's freedom. Painful and terrifying and absolutely worth it. The lobby was empty when we emerged, just a night doorman who nodded politely, probably accustomed to dramatic exits from the building's wealthy residents. Outside, my mother was waiting in a car as planned, her face tight with concern that relaxed when she saw me. How bad? She asked as I climbed into the back seat. Complete destruction, Maggie reported with satisfaction. Vanessa's reputation is in shambles, Derek's family is imploding, and Claire documented everything perfectly. My mother pulled me into a fierce hug. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. Your father would be too. We drove through Manhattan, the city alive with its usual Friday night energy, people streaming in and out of restaurants and bars, living their ordinary lives with their ordinary problems. I watched them through the tinted window, feeling displaced from that world, existing in some liminal space between who I'd been and who I was becoming. My mother had booked me a suite at a hotel near her own, neutral territory where neither Derek nor Vanessa could find me easily. Maggie came up with us, the three of us settling into the comfortable sitting room with its generic luxury and complete anonymity. Now what? I asked, suddenly exhausted as the adrenaline faded. Now we proceed with the legal action, Maggie said. I've scheduled a meeting with Judith Brennan for tomorrow morning. she'll file the divorce papers with all supporting documentation. We'll also pursue charges related to the financial exploitation, both against Derek's family and Vanessa for the charity fraud. My phone had been buzzing continuously, calls and texts from Derek, from Vanessa, from Patricia, from numbers I didn't recognize. I turned it off entirely, the silence sudden and absolute. Let them panic, my mother said firmly. Let them realize they can't control this, can't spin it, can't make it go away with the right words or the right story. They played a game assuming you'd never fight back. Time to show them what a mistake that was. Over the next several hours, we planned the next phases. The divorce filing would be public record, the evidence documented for the court. Maggie would pursue her complaints against Vanessa's charitable foundation, armed with proof of fraud that would interest both the IRS and the state attorney general. My mother would provide witness testimony about Vanessa's pattern of manipulation going back to childhood, establishing character evidence that would support our broader claims. But beyond the legal strategy, something else was happening. The three of us, connected by different forms of betrayal, had formed an unexpected alliance that felt more like family than any blood connection I'd experienced with Vanessa. We talked late into the night, sharing stories and strategies, processing the evening's confrontation, planning for the battles ahead. At some point, my mother ordered room service, and we ate expensive hotel food while discussing legal tactics and emotional recovery in equal measure. Around midnight, Maggie's phone rang. She answered, listened briefly, then smiled with grim satisfaction. That was Gregory. He wants to meet for breakfast tomorrow, asked if you'd be willing to join us, Claire. He's ready to provide testimony about Vanessa's manipulation during their marriage, corroborate what I've been saying for 2 years. Another ally, I said, feeling the foundations of our case growing stronger. Another witness to who she really is. Maggie nodded. It's falling into place. Vanessa built her life on other people's willingness to believe her lies, to accept her version of events. Once that credibility cracks, everything collapses. I finally fell asleep around 2, my mother in the adjoining room, Maggie having left with promises to return in the morning. My dreams were fragmented and strange, images of the dinner party mixed with memories of my wedding, of family gatherings where everyone smiled and lied, of the brownstone apartment in Brooklyn that had been my home but never truly felt like mine. When I woke, sunlight was streaming through the hotel windows, and for a moment, I didn't remember where I was or why. Then it all came back, the confrontation, the evidence, the way Derek's face had looked when he realized I'd known all along. Instead of the pain I expected, I felt only exhaustion and a strange sense of relief. My phone, when I turned it back on, showed 73 missed calls and twice as many texts. I scrolled through them briefly, noting the progression from Derek's angry demands for conversation to desperate apologies to threats about legal action. Vanessa's messages were fewer but more venomous, accusing me of betrayal and manipulation, calling me vindictive and cruel. Patricia had sent a single text, formal and cold, informing me that I was no longer welcome at any family events and that I should return any gifts given during the marriage. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. There was one message that surprised me, from my mother-in-law's sister, Derek's Aunt Carol, whom I'd always liked. I saw what happened. I'm so sorry, Claire. For what it's worth, some of us knew something was wrong but didn't realize how bad it was. If you need anything, please reach out. The small gesture of support from unexpected quarters reminded me that not everyone had been complicit, that there were people who'd been deceived alongside me. Breakfast with Maggie and Gregory was surprisingly comfortable. Gregory looked older than I remembered, the past years having added lines around his eyes that spoke of stress and regret. He apologized to both his mother and me, his words halting but sincere. I blamed her for everything, he said quietly, looking at Maggie. I thought she was controlling, that she couldn't accept my happiness. Vanessa was so convincing, so consistent in her version of events. I never questioned whether she might be lying. Manipulation works by exploiting our desire to believe, Maggie said gently. You loved Vanessa. You wanted to trust her. That's not a character flaw, Gregory. That's being human. What matters is what you do now that you know the truth. Gregory turned to me. I'll testify to whatever you need. The patterns of behavior, the way she systematically isolated me from family and friends, the financial improprieties I noticed but explained away. All of it. If it helps your case or my mother's complaints against her foundation, I'll provide documentation. The meeting with Judith Brennan later that morning was businesslike and efficient. She reviewed the evidence I'd gathered, nodding approvingly at the thoroughness of documentation. "This is exceptionally strong," she said. "The recordings, the financial records, the witness testimonies, all of it creates a clear picture of sustained deception and conspiracy. I can file today, have Derek served by this evening. Given the evidence, I expect he'll want to settle quickly rather than have this proceed to a contested divorce." "What about Vanessa?" I asked. "The affair, the role she played?" Judith considered. "Adultery itself isn't grounds for financial damages in New York, but the pattern of behavior, the conspiracy with Derek's family, the manipulation of your marriage, all of that creates a narrative that will influence the judge's decisions about asset division. Especially combined with the charitable fraud allegations, it paints a picture of someone who systematically exploits people for personal gain. That reputation follows you, affects how judges and juries perceive your credibility." We proceeded with the filing that afternoon, Judith submitting the papers to the court with all supporting documentation. Derek would be served with divorce papers at his office, a public humiliation that felt appropriate given how he'd planned to humiliate me. Maggie simultaneously filed her formal complaints with the IRS and State Attorney General regarding Vanessa's charitable foundation, including evidence of diverted funds and fraudulent donation claims. The wheels of justice moved slowly, but they were moving. The story broke in the society pages within 48 hours, a sanitized version that mentioned prominent socialite Vanessa Rothman and corporate attorney Derek Donovan facing legal troubles related to financial improprieties and marital discord. The details were vague, protected by ongoing investigations, but enough to start damaging reputations in the circles that mattered to them. Vanessa's charity work dried up overnight, organizations distancing themselves from potential scandal. Derek's law firm put him on administrative leave pending review of the allegations. Patricia and Kenneth faced uncomfortable questions at their country club about their role in their son's affair. I moved through those initial days in a strange fog, handling practical matters while emotionally detached. I found a new apartment in Brooklyn, smaller but entirely mine, and began the process of disentangling my life from Derek's. My mother extended her stay to help, her presence steady and grounding. Maggie became a regular fixture in my life, our alliance evolving into genuine friendship built on shared experience and mutual respect. The divorce proceedings moved faster than expected. Derek wanted to settle, to make it go away quietly, but Judith pushed back. Her client had been systematically deceived and betrayed, she argued. A quick settlement wasn't justice. The negotiations dragged through November and into December, each session revealing new depths to the deception, new evidence of money diverted or lies told. Eventually, we reached a settlement that gave me substantially more than I'd have gotten without the evidence of conspiracy. Not life-changing money, but enough to rebuild, to feel secure, to know that the betrayal carried consequences. Vanessa fared worse. The IRS investigation into her foundation uncovered systematic fraud spanning years, donations claimed but never made, personal expenses disguised as charitable work, tax deductions that were entirely fabricated. The state attorney general joined the investigation, and suddenly Vanessa was facing not just reputation damage but potential criminal charges. Her penthouse was seized as part of asset recovery, the symbol of her success taken away as evidence of her crime. Gregory provided damning testimony about her patterns during their marriage, corroborating Maggie's long-dismissed claims. In January, nearly 3 months after the dinner party, I testified in a deposition for the criminal case against Vanessa. Describing the affair was easier than I'd expected, clinical and factual, the emotional wound having scabbed over into scar tissue. But describing the systematic betrayal, the way she'd manipulated our entire family, the casual cruelty with which she'd stolen my husband while pretending to care about me, that was harder. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Denise Morrison, listened carefully and asked precise questions that drew out the pattern of behavior that matched similar patterns with Gregory, with charity donors, with anyone Vanessa had deemed useful. At the end of the session, Denise looked at me with something like admiration. You documented everything perfectly. Most people in your situation are too shocked, too hurt to gather evidence this methodically. What made you think to do it? I had help, I said. And I was angry enough to be strategic rather than just reactive. Anger is underrated, Denise replied. Properly channeled, it can move mountains. By spring, the legal matters were largely resolved. Vanessa pleaded guilty to tax fraud and charitable misappropriation, receiving a suspended sentence contingent on restitution and probation. She lost most of her assets, the money going back to the charities she'd defrauded. Her reputation in social circles was destroyed completely, the sophisticated philanthropist revealed as a con artist who'd exploited people's charitable impulses for personal gain. Derek's family faced their own reckonings, Patricia and Kenneth's standing in Greenwich society permanently damaged by their role in the conspiracy. Derek himself became a cautionary tale, the promising attorney who'd thrown away his career and marriage for an affair that imploded spectacularly. His relationship with Vanessa ended within weeks of the dinner party, each blaming the other for the disaster, their so-called true love revealed as mutual opportunism. He sent me a letter months later, a rambling apology that tried to explain his actions while simultaneously minimizing them. I read it once, felt nothing, and filed it with the other divorce documents. Some wounds heal better without forgiveness. Gregory and Maggie rebuilt their relationship slowly, carefully, learning to trust each other again after years of Vanessa's interference. Watching them together, seeing genuine affection restored, offered hope that some damage could be repaired if both people were willing to do the work. My own mother and I grew closer than we'd been in years, her unexpected support during the crisis opening conversations we'd never managed before. She acknowledged her failures during my childhood, the ways she'd enabled Vanessa's worst tendencies, and we began building something more honest in place of our old dynamic. As for me, I left teaching at the end of the school year. The security of academia no longer appealed, the safe predictability feeling like limitation rather than comfort. I enrolled in a graduate program for art appraisal and authentication, combining my knowledge of art history with practical skills that could lead to independent consulting. The future felt open in a way it hadn't in years, full of possibility rather than predetermined paths. On a warm evening in late May, I met Maggie for dinner at a small restaurant in the village, nothing fancy, just good food and better conversation. We'd made this a weekly tradition, two women who'd been betrayed finding solidarity and friendship in the aftermath. "How are you feeling?" she asked, studying me over her wine glass. "Really feeling," not the polite answer. "Different," I said, considering the question seriously. "Stronger, definitely. Sadder in some ways, older. But also more myself than I've ever been." "Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Maggie replied. Betrayal strips away illusions. What remains is either broken or stronger for having been tested. You chose strength. I thought about the woman I'd been 8 months ago, teaching art history and believing in a marriage that was already dead, trying to win approval from a family that was actively betraying her. That person felt like a stranger now, someone I could barely remember being. The woman I'd become was harder, yes, but also clearer, more certain of her own worth and less willing to accept treatment that diminished her. "Do you think we're vindictive?" I asked Maggie suddenly. "The way we exposed them, destroyed their reputations. Could we have handled it differently?" Maggie set down her glass and looked at me directly. "We could have handled it differently. We could have stayed silent, accepted the betrayal, let them control the narrative while we absorbed the damage quietly. Would that have been better? For who? Not for us. And not for the next people they would have done this to." She paused. "Justice and revenge aren't always different things, Claire. Sometimes revenge is just justice delivered by the people who were wronged instead of waiting for a system to do it for them." I thought about that as we finished dinner and walked through the village streets, past couples and families, past other people's ordinary lives unfolding in restaurants and apartments and parks. My life wasn't ordinary anymore. It had been shattered and rebuilt into something different, something I was still learning the shape of. But it was mine, authentically and completely, perhaps for the first time. The penthouse where it all unfolded was sold to new owners who probably never knew the drama that had occurred there. Derek moved to a smaller firm in New Jersey, his reputation damaged but not destroyed. Patricia and Kenneth stayed in Greenwich, their social standing diminished but survivable. Vanessa, last I heard, had moved to the West Coast, trying to rebuild far from the wreckage of her East Coast reputation. As for me, I stood in my small Brooklyn apartment on a Saturday morning in June, coffee in hand, looking out at the tree-lined street below. The space was modest but entirely my own, decorated with art I actually liked rather than pieces chosen to impress. On the wall was a photograph Maggie had given me, taken the night of the dinner party, the two of us leaving the building, my face caught in profile, expression determined and clear. "This is who you are becoming," she'd written on the back. "Remember her when things get hard." I thought about everything that had brought me to this moment, all the betrayal and pain and rage that had been transmuted into something harder and more permanent. I thought about standing in Vanessa's penthouse, systematically dismantling her carefully constructed lies while she watched her perfect life collapse. I thought about the look on Derek's face when he realized I'd known all along, that the quiet wife had been 3 steps ahead the entire time. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.